Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. Now, Guns N' Roses was one of the most popular rock or metal bands of the late 80s. I said rock or metal because there's a little bit of debate as to whether they are considered rock or heavy metal. I'm going to consider them heavy metal because, for one thing, they have a very thick sound. Slash's guitar work is definitely fits in with the metal scene very well. Appetite for Destruction, that has the 3 songs you most likely know by them, that being Welcome to the Jungle, Paradise City, and Sweet Child of Mine. With that said, there's some other really good songs on this album as well, such as Night Train, My Michelle, Mr. Brownstone. The last song, Rocket Queen, is really good, so nearly every song is very good on this album. They kind of fit in with the hair metal scene. They're a little like Motley Crue, but at the same time they have a very gritty, streetwise image along the lines of Skid Row. So either way, Appetite for Destruction is easily one of the best albums the band ever released. Anthrax, Among the Living. And this is easily Anthrax's best album. For one thing, while I do like their song Bring the Noise, I'm not a big fan of their more rap-oriented metal that they released later on, but Among the Living is a pure thrash metal album, and just about every song is really good. I'd say, I think nearly every song has a 5-star rating from me. Some highlights are Caught in a Mosh, and the title track Among the Living. NFL, Nice Fucking Life is a really good song, and there's some really fast tempos on this album and some really pounding drum work, and every band member is in top notch on this one. So either way, this is a really good thrash metal album. Queensryche, Operation Mindcrime. Now, Queensryche is easily one of the more sophisticated metal bands of the 1980s. Their songwriting is really good, especially on this album, because they wrote a really good story about mind control. It's kind of along the lines of the film The Manchurian Candidate. This story tells about a guy who is recruited by an underground group to execute corrupt political leaders. Simply by hearing the word mind crime, he is programmed to do whatever they program him to. And after a while, he becomes disillusioned by this when he's forced to kill a woman that he loves. And so for that reason, the album is actually very emotional and in a very genuine way. Like I said before, the songwriting and the lyrics are very sophisticated, and I really like the story on this one. The instrumentals are very good as well. This is easily one of the more sophisticated albums on the list, and it's one of the best concept albums ever released, in my opinion. Slayer, Hell Waits. This is easily Slayer's best underground album. This was released before Slayer worked with Rick Rubin, but it was right before Rain and Blood was released. This has a very raw production sound to it, which really adds a lot of atmosphere, because Slayer have always been one of the more evil sounding of the mainstream metal bands. And on this album, they sound almost like a slightly more cleaned up version of Venom. Some highlights of this one are the title track, Hell Awaits. Excellent song. Necrophiliac has a really good midsection to it. And in some ways, while Rain and Blood was a little bit faster and had shorter songs, I would say Hell Awaits is slightly more progressive, because the title track lasts about 6 minutes, and there's some other longer songs on there as well. So if you want to hear a more underground version of Slayer with longer songs and, I would say, even more evil sounding lyrics than Rain and Blood, then this is a good album to check out. Mercyful Fate, Melissa. Now, as far as Mercyful Fate albums go, the big two are Don't Break the Oath and Melissa. As far as production values go, Melissa had a little rougher sounding production values versus Don't Break the Oath, which had a very crisp sound, and I liked that one a lot for that reason. But on Melissa, the opening song, Evil, is a really good opening song, and the album as a whole was a big early influence on black metal, specifically King Diamond's imagery, his corpse paint. Well, while he was more influenced by Gene Simmons and Alice Cooper, but with a more ghoulish image, a lot of black metal bands took his look, and corpse paint basically emerged from there. King Diamond's high-pitched vocals are also what he's well known for. There's a lot of really good instrumentals on this album. It's very progressive, very complex. The song Satan's Fall is about 11 minutes long. It's the epic of the album, and that has some excellent guitar work. And even the last song, Melissa, is a really emotional song. That's the ballad of the album. and the emotion is very genuine on that song. Black Sabbath, Master of Reality. This is one of Black Sabbath's best, for sure. Sweet Leaf, the opening song, is basically the ultimate stoner song, as it opens up with a recording of one of the band members choking on a joint. So obviously that song is basically a love song about marijuana. Oddly enough, the second song, After Forever, is borderline Christian metal. Has some lyrics about saying, you know, you should love God and don't be afraid of what your friends might say. And it's pretty strange lyrics from Black Sabbath. The third song is an instrumental, but the fourth song, Children of the Grave, is definitely one of Black Sabbath's catchiest songs, along the lines of NIB, but with a more chugging riff and a little faster. But Children of the Grave is ultimately the song that made me want to buy this album. I think one of my favorite songs on here is their ballad, Solitude. Now, Black Sabbath has obviously had some ballads before, with Planet Caravan, one of their most famous ballads. But in all honesty, I think Solitude is actually a more solid song. It is highly emotional and very believable, and it has a flute in it. It almost sounds a little like Jethro Tull. It's a very slow and very melodic song, and it really sounds very nice, and I like that song a lot. It's possibly my favorite on the album, despite not being a metal song. And the last song, Into the Void, is one of the heaviest and fastest songs Black Sabbath ever released. My only gripe with the album is that it's way too short, because there's so many good songs, nearly every song is perfect, and then it just ends quickly. But the best thing you can do is just hit play again and you're good to go. Judas Priest, Sin After Sin. This is Judas Priest's third studio album, and one of their earlier ones from the 70s. For that reason, it shows a lot of early blueprints for what would later become musical standards for Judas Priest and for heavy metal as a whole. Some songs, like Let Us Pray, Call for the Priest, have some riffs that are going to sound very familiar. The riff in that song has been used in a lot of Judas Priest songs and in a lot of speed metal songs in general. My all-time favorite song on the album is Dissident Aggressor, easily one of the heaviest songs of the 1970s and of their whole career. Dissident Aggressor has a really high-pitched scream about 30 seconds into it, which is amazing, and the rest of the song is just easily one of Judas Priest's best. And as far as the heaviness factor goes, even when Slayer covered it on South of Heaven, they didn't outdo the extremity or heaviness of it, which says a lot. Some other really good songs on the album are Sinner, the opening song, is really catchy. Diamonds and Rust is a very good cover, and Starbreaker, which Arch Enemy covered some time ago, is also one of my favorites on the album as well. So either way, this is one of Judas Priest's best albums of the 70s, and one of their best albums altogether. Megadeth, Peace Sells. This was the first Megadeth album that I ever bought, and it's easily one of their best albums. And while the production values aren't quite as good as some of their later albums, it does have a very good thrash metal sound to it. Dave Mustaine is an excellent guitarist, and while his vocals fit Megadeth's music, I'm a bigger fan of his guitar work than I am of him as a vocalist. The bass line on the title track, Peace Sells, But Who's Buying, is really catchy. One of the middle songs, Good Morning, Black Friday, one of the longer tracks on the album, is probably my favorite. It starts out with kind of a melodic, slightly ominous tone, and then it cuts into a really fast thrashing song, tells a story about this serial killer who commits a bloodbath of epic proportions. And that's easily one of the best songs on the album. Very thrashy, very epic, and very good instrumentals all around. But overall, Peace Sells But Who's Buying is an excellent album, easily one of Megadeth's best. Has great guitar work, excellent songs. Emperor, In the Nightside Eclipse. Ultimately, this was the album that got me into black metal to begin with. Black metal was something that, around 2006, when I was getting into heavy metal and the subgenres, I'd researched black metal a little bit, and I wasn't that familiar with it. I came across Emperor in the Nightside Eclipse, and what really drew me into the album was the cover work. I have to say the cover work for this album is one of my favorite album covers of all time. The album altogether it's very raw with very low production values, but at the same time there's a certain level of sophistication to it due to almost has like a classical structure to it based on some of the choir elements that they use and some of the keyboards. A lot of very atmospheric, and while it's not a symphonic black metal album, there is almost a classical feel to it, and it was recorded in the Memorial Hall for Edward Grieg, so that definitely adds a lot of atmosphere to it. Easily the best song on the album is I Am the Black Wizards. Altogether, the album as a whole is very atmospheric. It definitely makes you feel like you're in the barren wilderness of Scandinavia. Ozzy Osbourne, Diary of a Madman. Now, two of the big albums by Ozzy Osbourne are Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman. And also, these were the two albums that Ozzy Osbourne did with guitarist Randy Rhoads. Rhoads was an excellent guitarist. He had a lot of great technical work, and kind of neoclassical style. His guitar work is ultimately what makes this album excellent. The opening song, Over the Mountain, has a really good wall of sound to it with the drums and the bass and the guitar work on top of that. Some other really good songs on the album are Flying High Again. You've probably heard that at some point. SATO has really good chorus to it. And easily the best song is the title track, Diary of a Madman. And that has a very epic, it starts out on a melodic tone. That definitely shows a very strong classical influence throughout it as well, because their strings are present, and it's easily one of the best songs on the album and from Ozzy's early career. So if you're going to look at listening to any solo albums by Ozzy Osbourne, this one and Blizzard of Oz are the ones I recommend the most, especially this one.